Welcome, Cornerstone kids. I'm glad you're here. And I want to start today with a little thinking about a Disney princess. Okay, now some of you are like, yay, I love Disney princesses, and others are like, I hate Disney princesses. Okay, so do you know the story of Cinderella? Whether you like princesses or you don't, I bet you know the story, right? There was a girl, and all she did was clean all day for her mean stepmother and stepsister. She was like their slave. She did all the dirty work. She didn't even get invited to the ball. Well, turns out the prince falls in love with her, and they get married, and she is now like a princess. She went from this ordinary girl that had actually kind of a terrible life to a princess and living in a castle. And lots of us like that love story. Okay, some of you don't, I understand. But today we're going to talk about it's kind of a love story, okay? But we can't just skip over them. So I hope you learned something new today. And even if you don't like love stories, you will learn something new about God that you can use in your life, okay? Because today's story is about, do you remember Abraham? And do you remember that he had a son, Isaac? And remember he put Isaac on the altar like he was going to sacrifice him, cut him up with a knife? Do you remember that? And then God said, stop. Thank goodness, right? Well, today we're going to talk about Isaac because Isaac now is growing up and it's time for him to get married. And so he's the son of Abraham, and Abraham wanted Isaac to marry someone that was from their hometown rather than marrying someone that lived nearby them right now. So Abraham was like, I'm going to send my servants back to my hometown to find a wife for my son because I want Isaac to marry someone from our hometown, from the place that we're from. And so he said, go find a wife. Can you say that? Go find a wife. Isn't that weird? He told his servant, go find a wife for my son. And so the servant said, okay. He was probably thinking in his mind how in the world am I going to find a wife for Isaac out of all these women that live in this town? How am I supposed to know which one to bring back to Abraham and Isaac? He didn't know. And so I want to share with you kind of what the servant did and how the story went. We are going to start in Genesis 24. Okay, so Genesis is the book that we've been following all along. We talked about the Tower of Babel. We talked about Abraham and Isaac last week. We're talking about Isaac and Rebecca this week. And you'll find out Rebecca is one of the main characters from this week's story, the part of our love story that you're gonna like. Okay, so we're in Genesis, first book, and we're in chapter 24, the big 24. And we are going to start at the little 12, verse 12. So the servant was headed to their hometown, and he got there, and he was just like, now what? Now what am I going to do? Guess what he did? He prayed. The thing that you and I should do when we're in a situation that we're like, okay, I'm here. What do I do now? We pray. We ask God to give us direction. So the servant, this is the little 12, he prayed, Lord, you are the God of my master Abraham. Give me success today. Be kind to my master Abraham. I'm standing beside this spring. The daughters of the people who live in the town are coming out here to get water. So they had, in those days, they had a well, okay? So it was a huge hole in the ground where they stored the water, and everybody would come from the neighboring areas with their buckets and fill them with water to take back home. They didn't have like faucets they could just turn on. They had to come collect their water and take it back home. The water for drinking or for taking a bath or for doing anything that they needed with water. So, and this was kind of a women's job. Mostly it was all women that went and collected this water. So the servant's standing there at the well and he's like, okay, so this is a good place because all the women come to this spot. And we are we're at 14 now. Okay, so he prays to God and he says to God, I will speak to a young woman and I'll say, please lower your jar so I can have a drink. And suppose she says, have a drink of water, and I'll get some for your camels too. Then let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. That's how I'll know you have been kind to my master. So he says to God in his prayer, this is the servant of Abraham, he says, when a lady comes here, I'll say, can you get me some water? Okay? And if the lady just gets me water, I'll know she's not the one. But if she gets me water and she says, I'll get some for your camel, okay, God, then that'll be your sign to me that she's the one. She is the one I'm going to take home for Isaac to marry. And before he had even finished praying, Rebecca came out, and she had a jar on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah. Milcah was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. Okay, so she was kind of like a distant relative. The young woman was very beautiful. No man had ever been with her before, and she went down to the spring. She filled her jar, and she came up again. And the servant was like, okay, maybe this is the one. So he hurried to meet her, and he said, please give me a little water from your jar. Have a drink, sir, she said. She quickly lowered the jar to her hands, and she gave him a drink. After she had given him a drink, she said, are you ready? I'll get water for your camels too. I'll keep doing it until they finish drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the stone tub and she ran back to the well to get more water. She got enough for all of his camels. The man didn't say a word. He watched her closely. He wanted to learn whether the Lord had given him success on the journey he had made. And so the servant right away prayed to God. God sent Rebecca, and he was like, I think this is the one I'm supposed to take back for Isaac to marry. And so he gave her some beautiful jewelry that was kind of like we do now. We would give somebody like a ring if we wanted to get married to them. Well, the servant was like, here's a gift for you, Rebecca. And she took the servant back to her home to meet her family, and he met her brother. And he, in those days, you kind of gave a gift to the girl's family to say, I'm taking your daughter to get married, and here's a gift, like, thank you for giving me your daughter to marry. And so the servant gave a gift to her family, which was like animals, and it was like camels and gifts, and that was what he gave to her family, and he took Rebecca with him. And so he had success. The servant just went to the town and he found God's plan. He found the woman that God had for Isaac to marry. And so I want to read just the end of their story. The whole story is in chapter 24. And if you know how to read, this would be a really good story to read. I haven't told you all the details, and I'm not going to tell you all the details because that would take a long time. But you can read all of the details in Genesis 24, okay? It tells the story of the servant going and Rebecca and all of that. Now here's the way it ends. This is still chapter 24, but it's the little 63, okay? It's at the end. So Isaac was still home with his dad, Abraham, and they were working. And one evening, Isaac went out to the field and he wanted to spend some time thinking. When he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel. She asked the servant, "Hey, who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He's my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered her face. Oh, she was like, "This is the guy. This is the guy I'm going to marry." Then the servant told Isaac everything he had done. Isaac brought Rebekah into the tent that had belonged to his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother died. So Isaac waited, he trusted God, and God brought the perfect wife for him, Rebekah, into his life. Now, I want you to watch this story. It's kind of an interesting one. So here's a little video that you can look at to hear the story of Rebekah and Isaac. And then I'll be back to wrap up and do the craft. Okay, so watch the video.
Abraham's son Isaac was all grown up. So Abraham told his servant,
"Go back to the land I came from and find a wife for my son."
The servant loaded up camels with all kinds of wonderful presents and rode off. After he got to the land far away, he wasn't sure how to find a wife for Isaac. At a place where girls came to get water, he prayed,
"Let the right girl give me water."
Before the servant had finished praying, a beautiful young woman came to get water.
"Will you give me some water, please?"
Yes, I'll get water for your camels too.
It was a big job. Thirsty camels can drink a lot of water. Back and forth she went, pouring water for them all. The servant knew this woman was the one to be Isaac's wife. Her name was Rebekah. The servant took gifts to her family and asked if Rebekah could marry Isaac. Her father said she could, and Rebekah wanted to get married too. So she went home with the servant to meet Isaac. The camels swayed and bumped along the road all the way to Canaan, where Isaac lived. One evening, just before the sun went down, the camels stopped. A young man was walking in the field. He looked up and saw the camels. His bride had come. Isaac loved Rebekah. And so they were married.
Okay, did you like that love story? Was it better than Cinderella or just as bad? Okay, so it is a fun story to read, but what do we use from that story in our life? And this is what I was thinking. When I hear that story, I learn that I can trust God. We talked last week about how God kept his promises to Abraham, giving him descendants, giving him kids. God kept his promises. And it's a similar story here with Isaac, that he trusted God. The servant trusted God. The servant just went to this random town and went to the well and sat there and trusted God to bring the right woman for him to take home. The servant trusted God. Abraham and Isaac trusted God. They just sent a servant and trusted God to bring back the right woman for Isaac to marry, and God did it. And you know what? You and I, we can trust God too. Sometimes we think we have to work really hard and make everything good happen in our life. We are the ones that have to do everything, and we are the ones that have to work so hard. But you know what? God, he can be trusted to do the right thing for our life. We do our part, and we can trust him to take care of what happens next. So we don't have to worry. We have to give it to God. There's a verse that I wanted to read as we finish up today, and it's in Psalm. Okay, remember, Psalm is in the very middle of your Bible, so if you take your fingers and you try to divide the Bible exactly in half, you're going to get to Psalm. If you're a little bit off, okay, you can turn back or turn forward just a little bit, you'll be at Psalm. And I'm going to go to Psalm. It's chapter 9, so the beginning of Psalm. You're going to look for Psalm 9, the big 9, and I'm going to read the little 10. Psalm 9:10. Lord, those who know you will trust in you. You have never deserted those who look to you. That's a promise. We talked about promises last week, and that's a promise God makes. We can trust him. He never deserts us. When we look to him, he is there. When we ask him to give us wisdom or to guide our path, he's there to do it. He's not going to desert you. He can be trusted 100%. Okay? And so even if you don't like love stories, I hope that you take with you the idea from Isaac and Rebekah that God can be trusted. He can be trusted with your life and your decisions. He will not let us down. He will not desert us. We're gonna do today's craft, but I want us first to pray. So fold your hands so they're not playing with anything, and close your eyes so no one distracts you. Oh God, we are so thankful that we can trust you. You will not let us down. You will not desert us. You will help us to know the right decision to make at the right time. And I pray that these kids, and also myself, that we wouldn't worry about things, that we would do our best and just trust you to take care of the rest. So I pray this week that you would just help us to relax in knowing that we can trust you. We wouldn't worry. We wouldn't cause stress in our lives. We would just trust you to take care of those things that come into our life and into our mind. And we thank you that you keep your promises and you will do it. You won't leave us alone. We can trust you. We love you, Jesus. We thank you that you love us no matter what. Amen. We can trust him, okay? You trust God. We can trust him more than any other person. Now, for today's, if you're making the book with us, okay, we have our page on creation. We have our page on Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Don't forget you have slip-up slips in your Cain and Abel page, okay, if you need to say sorry to someone. We have Noah, the Tower of Babel. Last week we added Abraham and Isaac and the promises that God keeps. Okay, so now we're going to add on the next page. So you're going to take a blank paper, fold it in half, and here's what you're going to put on today's page. Okay, let's put the story at the bottom so we don't forget. If you're not making the book, that's fine. Just make this page with us. Okay, you're going to put Isaac and Rebecca on the bottom, and where it is in the Bible is Genesis 24, so you can write that at the bottom also. Okay, Isaac and Rebecca, Genesis 24. Now, I wrote that verse that I just read because I wanted to remember that I can trust God. So I wrote Psalm 9:10, and I wrote it up at the top. If you want to just write Psalm 9:10, or if you want to write I can trust God, that's fine too, because that's what the verse is saying basically. So if you want to write it in fewer words, or if you want to write the whole verse, that's great too. Now, the last thing I want you to put on this page to have it ready is I want you to draw the path, a pathway, like a trail, okay? It can go zigzag, it can make some more swirls, whatever. Just make a path from the top to the bottom, because it's going to represent sort of like the journey that the servant went on from to find Rebecca for Isaac. And we have a journey too of our life, and we can trust God all along it. Okay, so once you have the verse, the title, and the pathway, you can put this paper down for a second. And we're going to make 3 things. You can use a piece of paper, or you can draw them on your path. But let me show you what I did. I first drew the well, because this is where, if you remember, this is where the servant found Rebecca at the well. I made it, they're usually made out of stones, so that's why I cut out some stones and made a well out of stone. Okay, you are going to make the house. This is going to just represent Isaac and Abraham's house. It's going to be along at the end of the path, right? This is where they found Rebecca. This is where they took Rebecca. And don't look too carefully at my kind of crazy camel, but the camel's going to be along the path. So don't worry, if you're not an artist like me and your camel looks kind of crazy like mine, it's okay. Okay, so you have 3 items I want you to make, or you can cut them out, or you can draw them on your path. So I have my 3 cut out, and I am going to put them along my path. So the first one I'm going to put is the well. So I'm going to put this at the top of my page, because Abraham's servant came to the well, and then he found Rebecca there and traveled along the path with Rebecca on the camel. So either draw the camel or glue on the camel like I did along the path. Could be anywhere along the path, because they took the camel, they returned home on the camel. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to place Abraham and Isaac's home here at the end of the path, because that's where they brought Rebecca. Okay, so the last item is going to be added on the end of the path. So there you go. You're going to put, if you drew the items on the pathway, that's good too. Okay, if you want to add some more color or just leave them solid like I did, either way is fine. So this page is going to be added next to our book. Okay, so you'll just glue it on. So you have the page from Abraham and Isaac. You'll put glue on this side and just attach the top of it. Leave the bottom like flappy, okay, unattached. So don't forget this week that you can trust God just like Abraham and Isaac trusted God to bring them Rebecca. And God does what we trust him to do. And so I hope you guys have a good week, and you remember to trust God. All right, Cornerstone kids, bye.